Hi, my name is Claire Krieger and I am a teaching artist with Louisville Visual Art. Today we're going to be talking about zines and how to make them and what's a zine. So I'm an artist here in Louisville and I make a lot of zines. It's part of my personal practice, and I'm going to tell you a little bit why after I talk about some history and some different ways to make them. So what is a zine? That is spelled Z-I-N-E. It is like magazine, but just the last part of the word. Zines started in the 1930s, actually as a way in the science fiction community. So they are small publications, usually self-produced, self-published. They typically have a smaller circulation than a mainstream magazine. And the reason being that they are a little bit more niche. They are something that is not particularly mainstream. Maybe they're unique ideas. They had a lot more forefront in the 70s and 80s in underground punk music scenes and other underground scenes, because they were a way to disseminate information that maybe wasn't accepted in the mainstream to these smaller subculture communities. So they had a real revival then, and they became really, really important to have ideas and to talk about music and talk about all these alternative lifestyles. So today the zine community is pretty big. There are all sorts of different kinds of genres. It's really easy, especially in the digital age, to reproduce things. So, in the 70s and the 80s and the 90s, everything was done on a copy machine pretty much. And now I have a copy machine, which I'm really excited about. But I also do a lot of things digitally. So there's something to having some of your actual handiwork in it, but it is really easy to produce something on a computer. So I do a lot of stuff by hand, and sometimes I set up some layouts to print them out on my computer. So I would like to talk a little bit about where can you find zines now? So there's a lot of zine fests around the country, around the world. A lot of local bookstores and local businesses have zines. I know here in Louisville you see them around a lot of different places, which is really cool. So if you make zines, you can go and say, hey, will you sell my zine? There's a lot of really big festivals around the country. Chicago Zine Fest, the New York Art Book Fair has a big zine section. I've done Atlanta Zine Fest, San Diego Zine Fest. We have a really great Zine Fest in Lexington that used to be called Ephemera Fest. Now it's the Kentucky Fried Zine Fest. So there's Cincinnati. I think it's called Zine. I'm sorry, I don't know the title of that off the top of my head. But there's one, they're all over. There's all of these really great Zine Fests in all sorts of cities, big and small. So you can go and you can table, and a lot of times you meet a lot of interesting people because it's a pretty DIY community. So you end up meeting a lot of people who are excited about what they're making, and you can trade, and you can meet a lot of other interesting people who might have different ideas or similar ideas. So it's a really supportive community typically. There are a lot of spaces for all sorts of ideas. So zines are a really cool, accessible art form, and that's actually part of the reason I really love them. I think that they're a good way to experiment with an idea, experiment with a format. So it's not, they're pretty cheap to produce. Maybe you don't want to make hundreds of copies. Maybe you want to make 20 copies, and then you're like, you know what, that idea was cool, but I'm going to move on. So they're a really good resource for trying something new without a lot of failure. Nothing's really going to happen if you fail at making a zine and you don't like it. They're really accessible. I'm able to give away a lot of zines, so I trade them and I sell them, but also I can give them to a person because they didn't cost me very much to produce, so it's really easy for me to share my work if I want to. So there's a lot of reasons why I think that zines are a really important way to create work and share work with the world. So I'm very pro zine, I'm very pro accessible media, and I'm super excited to be making zines with you today. So I'm going to show you guys a little bit about what I do. I'm also going to show you some examples of some other people's work that I think is a neat way to make it. Because I'm going to talk a lot about materials and different ways that you could put together zines. So I'll show you a couple different ways of folding a poster zine. And I'm actually going to give you a little bit of insight into maybe my wild organization process, which you may or may not like. But, we're all different people. We all figure this out our own ways. So I am going to show you some work by other people that I think is kind of interesting. This is a zine that one of my friends made that's actually kind of a Christmas ornament, but she put together all of these Bat Boy covers and made them into they're all Christmas themed Bat Boy, but she also put this velvet ribbon. So just these Bat Boy collage pieces. So it can be used as an ornament, which I think is really cool. And it's also holiday related, Bat Boy. So this is one I think is really neat. This I actually got at Printed Matter in New York, which is an amazing place. They do a lot of art books, and they have a lot of bigger publications, but they also do a ton of zines and a lot of local artists. So if you're ever in New York City, go to Printed Matter. It is like an amazing space. It's really supportive of artists, and it is just wild. So I got this at Printed Matter, I don't know when, quite a while ago. But something that I think is really neat, it's called Head Drawings, and it is by D. Stairs, is it was made using an old school label maker, which is really cool. So I think that that's a really neat way to do an original cover, but also easy to produce. It's also got this binding, which is pretty unique if you have access to something like this. Maybe even in a library, I think it could be a cool way to make a short run. So Head Drawings. These are this guy D. Stairs, and these are actually pretty old. So I did some research on the zine, and he actually did these in the 70s and put out this book, in 2010. So he did like a themed photo booth shoot, and he would turn his hair into these like themed, colorful things, and then assemble them. Like here's like all sorts of stripes. So I thought this was a cool idea. There's no text, but we get it, like drawings on heads. And I also think it's like a cool way to bind a zine. So almost like a notebook. That's like one that I've always really liked. Here's a really tiny zine. So this is something really easy. I think tiny zines can be pretty cute. This one is made like a poster zine. So there's like back pages, but you wouldn't open it for any reason. This is a really simple way to make one. So I'm gonna show you how to make this zine. And this one is called, I know it's kind of hard to see, Why You Are the Greatest. And it's a lot of like tiny little cute drawings about positivity. So I really like this zine. And I like the size. I think things like this are really cute and small, and you could just share them with people and you can trade them. I am actually pretty sure I got this from a trade. I actually also run a zine swap every once in a while. So we all make new zines and then we trade them. It's a cool way to have accountability for your project, and that's always something you could do with your friends, like, hey, let's do a zine challenge. So I do that with a group of people, and we all make new zines and then we all trade them. So it's cool, you get like 15 new zines from people and you share yours with them. This is one from that, and it is called Crushed It. And the idea of this zine is the woman who made this copied all of these diary notes about her crushes when she was in middle school. So it is just these like photocopies of her diary, and it is hilarious. So I thought this was a really cool theme, a really cool and funny idea. That was pretty neat. And then this is like a poster zine. So I wanted to show you, I can't remember where I got this, but I also think it's risograph printed, which I'll talk a little bit about that when we get to materials. So I think this one's pretty cool, and it is a poster zine, which I have been making quite a few zines like this recently, which means that once you get through all the pages, you can fold it out, and on the other side, it has a poster. Right? Pretty cool. And then it kind of folds back up into itself. I know it looks kind of tricky, but I will show you as best as possible how to make it simple. Because it took me a little bit of time to get used to, and now I'm like, I've got this, and I'm pretty used to folding these now. So those are some other people's zines that I think had some cool solutions. I'm going to talk a little about some of the zines that I have made, and this particular selection are things that I think show a nice range of materials and ways to make them. So this is a pretty old zine that I made called Autographics, and I made this like maybe 12 or 13 years ago, but it was cataloging the different graphics you find on cars, and then I auto-categorize them by making up my own. I called this one lasers, so it was things I thought were like lasers on cars. So I worked on collecting these pictures. And the other thing was, for the rest of the book, I used all of these graphics from a Boy Scout handbook that I found from the 60s, because I thought that was like a nice way to frame it. So all of the pages have all of these like Boy Scout texts. I thought it was like a nice juxtaposition. And then something else I want to say about this is it is full color, which can be hard to produce because it's expensive. But something that I did for the cover is it's just black and white, and then for each one I just painted these stripes with watercolor. So I gave it a really nice touch without having to pay for these nice heavy color covers, and each one of them has these stripes. So you might think about something you can really quickly do on a cover that would make it more one of a kind. Even if your zine is black and white and you just do some like scribbles around the edges of each cover, maybe then you would have it would be like really boosting it to the next level. So that's something I think about, how can I easily make this sort of just next level without doing a lot of work. So that's something to think about. So Now and Then, it's a zine about living in Florida and going back after not having lived there for a long time. So it's got a lot of photographs and drawings, and I made this while I was at an artist residency in Key West. but I really wanted to talk about it because of how the cover was made. So this is an inkjet print of a palm frond that I photographed. And then on top of that, I did these silk screens. So I designed these letters and I burned a screen, if you do any screen printing. And then I used a split fountain technique. So I had 3 colors. And as I did a run of these, the colors would mix a little bit more. So every cover is unique. So the earlier ones in a run of screens, this one's pretty early because you can see the colors are really divided. But after a while, they would get kind of murky. And I like that. I like that each cover is totally unique. And so these colors would blend. And if you want to learn more about that, it's called a split fountain technique, and you can find all about it on the internet. So that's a pretty cool way to make something that has a lot of impact, but really is fairly simple to reproduce, because the idea is that we're reproducing quite a few of these and how to make them unique, but also easy to, make multiples. This is another project I did it's a coloring book about, I got so much glare, about 90s celebs as cacti. So the reason I want to talk about this, and I'll show you the inside, I'm not sure you can really see, it's got sort of a wallpaper effect on the cover, but I like these, I made these sort of slips, and since it was 90s themed, I used all of the original 90s emojis. So this is how it comes if you purchased it, and then you take that sleeve off, because this comes off, to open it, right? So then here's the book. And just so you get an idea of what's inside. It's all sort of 90s celebrities that are reimagined as potted plants. And then it's a coloring book. And something I thought about when I made this was I thought, I need to think about what weight of paper will hold something. Because I actually wanted it to be functional. I wanted to make a coloring book people could actually color. And just the lightest weight paper, which is usually 22 pound, is kind of transparent. And I figured it might not hold if you're doing markers. So I stepped it up just to the next level of paper weight because I wanted it to be actually functional. So that was something I thought about. And a lot of this has come from trial and error and just having made a lot of zines over the years. This is a risograph zine that I made a few years back about dogs, some dogs that I've had in my life. So I think I promised that we would talk about risograph. I'm sorry there's so much glare on this. So this is all just 2 colors. It is red and blue. And a risograph is a machine that looks like a copy machine, but it actually functions more like screen printing. So you burn a master and you have different color drums, and whatever you put on top, like a copy machine, it prints out whatever color is in the drum, whatever drum color is in there. So, I did 2 colors, meaning they all had to run through 2 times. And you can mix the colors, and it takes a lot of preparation in terms of how you set it up. I'm actually working on a risograph zine right now. But it takes a little bit more thought than just drawing something and photocopying it. It takes a little bit more practice and setup. But if it's something you're interested in, it's a super cool process. And sometimes lining things up, it doesn't totally line up perfectly. It sort of feels like old books from the 30s, which is always really neat. So this is a risograph zine I did a few years back. And you could do so many colors with risograph. I just used the 2 color, but I could do many more color and layer it and really do a good job of combining them and get even more colors, because where the red and the blue overlap, I could get purple. So there's all sorts of ways to print zines. This is another zine that I made really recently. It is called Scenes from Quarantine, and it's a collage zine. So this is a poster zine, and I'm going to show you actually the master of this, and the master meaning the one that I keep and could reproduce endlessly, because this is a copy, obviously. So this is all collage. I do some collage work. I have a lot of old magazines. I cut it out and I set it up. And like I mentioned, it's a poster zine. So on the other side, it folds out into a poster and then can go back in. So I'm going to talk a little bit about how to make something like this. And this is another zine I made a couple years ago called How I Survived LA, about my time living in LA and kind of how I got through it because it was a little stressful. And it is a black and white zine, meaning that I just printed black and white copies, which is really cheap. But to step it up again, all the covers I printed with some color, meaning I only had to make, I think I actually got 4 per page. So just 4 per page color copies just to step it up on the cover. And then this is also a metallic paper. So pretty cheap to produce, but stands out a little bit more because it has a lot of color on the cover. So something to think about. All right, so let's talk about some of the materials that I use in making zines. This is a very important tool if you're going to make a lot of zines. And I have had this for about 15 years, and it is one of my prized possessions. It is a long arm stapler. So you can find these a lot of places to use. I make them, I make a lot of zines, and I really wanted my own, so I kind of sprung for one, and I have found it endlessly helpful. Because other staplers, you can't fit pretty big stuff to staple the spine. So long arm stapler. Other things that I use. I really like to use light pencils because I really like to sketch ahead of time if I'm doing a drawing or illustration zine. So this is a 4H, meaning that it is going to make really light marks, very easy to erase, which is great because I just want to get the idea out and then I'm going to ink it probably. Just to show you, here's a zine I'm working on that I've done all in 4H, and you can barely see it because I don't need to. I just wanted to get the design down. It was a lot easier to erase that way. So you might think about using really soft pencil leads rather than a really harsh one, so the H's, because it's easier to erase. Got a Prismacolor Magic Rub eraser. It is an eraser I really like. An X-Acto knife can be really helpful for making zines, especially if you're going to go poster zine. You have to cut a slice in the middle, so an X-Acto knife. I have a variety of different art pens because I like to use different sizes and different textures, so I have a lot of things like this. This is a Le Pen, which is pretty nice, one of my new favorites, and then a Pilot Fine Liner, which is one I've really liked recently. I also really like Pentel sign pens. Sorry, to be said. All right, and a bone folder. This is incredibly helpful. So to make really nice, smooth creases, this is what I use, and I will show you how I'm using this. And you can see this zine actually stays pretty flat because I have really just smushed the heck out of it with my bone folder to make a really nice crease. So it makes your zines really flat and well folded. So I've also had this for a long time, and I use it primarily for bookmaking, but if it's something you want to get into, it might be a handy thing to purchase. All right, let's talk about layout. Let's talk about ideas. So I am working on a couple of zines right now, so I'm going to show you my in process, and I'm also going to show you, scenes from quarantine, this collage zine. This is what my master looks like. It's the actual pieces. So you don't have to make them actually as small as your pages. You can make bigger illustrations as your originals, which I do sometimes. But for this one, I just wanted to make these tiny little collages actual size. And this is just the one side, so you can see this is pretty stiff. Now, to fold something like this takes a little bit of thought, and I'm going to show you because I usually make a little miniature mock-up just so I can actually visualize it since I don't do a lot of digital work. If you're super digital savvy, I bet you could do that really easily. And we all have our own processes. I figured out mine and it works for me and it changes over time, but I'm going to show you what I do just so you have an idea. This is another zine I'm working on, a wristgraph zine. So you can see this is going to be 2 pages. So this will get cut in half, and then all my pages will line up, and it'll be 2-sided. Again, this is trying to figure out how to layer things to get multiple colors. It's still red and blue. Once I've made all of my pieces for a zine, I will lay them out. If it's just a zine that needs to be stapled, the poster folding zine does not get stapled. It gets folded carefully. But let's say I'm doing a zine such as Frankie's Dreams, which has a lot of dream illustrations. And, it's something else I like to do is I like to try different shapes and sizes. I think it's pretty fun to do that. So you can see this is a zine that goes this direction. This is a 1/4 page, meaning every page like this, 8.5 by 11, would make 2 pages. And obviously I formatted mine to go like this, but you can go either way. This is also a 1/4 page. Another 1/4 page. These are half pages, meaning for every one of these we'll just get 1. You can even go smaller than that also. So if you're using a larger piece, 11 by 17, like my poster zine, this is pretty cute and small, and it is essentially a 1/4 of this one. But there's all sorts of sizes to play with, all sorts of formats. You can kind of figure it out by folding and just trying it. So again, this is Frankie's Dreams. So here's some pieces of the inside. After I cut the paper, which this was a 1 page, right? And then I have to make sure, usually I have the stacks all in order so I can grab one and then the next and then the next. And then, I have all my stacks, and then what I'll do is I'll fold them, try to keep them nice and clean, evenly fold it, and then I try to meet the edges. Now, I guess it depends on how careful you want to be. I try to be really careful, so I'm trying to line this up. And a lot of times what I'll do is I'll fold it before I staple it. This is a great time to use a bone folder. Right now I'm trying to hold it in place. Oof, that is a good crease. Right, look at that. Oof, perfect. So then what I'll do once I have all my pages together, and this is only 2, this actually has like 6 pages in it. I'll unfold it, but I have this nice crease as a guide for where the staple can go. So then I know exactly, because if I haven't folded it first, I might not get it quite right. So that's just my process of how I do it. Things I figured out over the years. I'm making a lot of zines that didn't turn out right. All right, so let's talk about making a poster zine. I think poster zines are fun because you can make them any way you want. You know, you've kind of got like 2 different formats. You've got a poster on one side and you have a zine on the other. So I think they're nice because you're kind of doing 2 different things. They also seem a little like a magic trick. So you can see here is my quarantine zine. This is going to be a little tricky, so I'm going to try to do my best to explain it to you. All right, so I did this one on 8.5 by 17 because this is the biggest that my copy machine I have at home will print. So to kind of create a guide, first I'm going to fold it hot dog style. And, you know, honestly, the more that you crease it properly and really carefully, you're going to have like a really neat final product. Because what really isn't fun is when you haven't set it, if you've set it up kind of sloppy and then when you make all your copies, it doesn't line up right. That is a real bummer. I can tell you that. So this is the time to really pay attention to how you are folding and, you know, properly meeting all your edges. Like just now, see, I just didn't fold it right. I'm gonna fix it. Because it's the setup that's important. Okay. So folding this hot dog style. All right, so this is telling us, right, that our poster zine, that's how tall our pages are going to be. Now, I am going to fold this way, so hamburger style, as they say. Again, folding it pretty carefully, matching all the edges. Okay, so now this is what we have. And I try to do this the same way every time I make a full poster zine, where I lay them out the same way just because it's easier for me to remember. Got a system and it works for me. So if I am looking at the 2 side by side, I might try to match this up. So I know this is going to be my cover. I'm going to mark it. So I'm going to write cover. I'm actually going to write front cover and then back cover. Okay, so just so I'm clear, right? You can see it matching up with my front cover there. Okay, so I now know that this is my front cover and back cover. Now I'm writing this just to show you as a guide. You could always do this in pencil if you're making a master, just so it's more helpful for you. Now I'm also looking at this, and it's also nice that I've made a few of these so I can go back and say, how did I do that? And I try to write myself notes as well. I'm gonna give you a little insight into the way I store stuff, and you might think it's a little wild, but works for me. So now I know this is my first page and my second page, so I'm just gonna write like 1 and then 2. And then half of this is upside down and half of it isn't. I gotta remember that. All right, so then I know I'm gonna flip it. 3, 4, 5, 6. All right, so here's like the guide I have made for myself, okay? So the one tricky thing about making a poster zine is it doesn't exactly fold the same way on both sides. I know that's a little bit hard to wrap your brain around. So remember, you're gonna have to fold all of these. So if you make a run of like 50 zines, by the end of it, you're gonna be like whipping them out, putting them together, just bone folding them, and they're gonna be perfect. And you don't even really have to think about how they go together. But for the first couple, you're gonna have to think a little bit harder about it. So when I say that they don't fold the same way, what I mean is this one is gonna fold like this, but this is gonna fold like this. I know that that's very confusing. We can't just fold it all the same way. But the reason, I will show you, all right? So what I'm gonna do, actually I'm gonna double check this with my zines because I like to double check before I do everything. All right. Okay, so yeah, front and back cover folds like this, but this side folds like this. Pretty confusing. So that means, well, I've got this hot dog style. I'm gonna fold my back cover and line it up here, right? So I'm gonna fold my back cover and my front cover. Oh, I'm sorry, this is so hard to see. Okay. So I'm going to fold that in. My back cover is facing out. Okay. Daisy is my dog Daisy. She's just, patrolling. All right. I know this is a little confusing, right? So now I've got this fold. But the other side, we're going to fold while it's totally open. And we are going to fold it in. I was trying to think of a way to color code this to make it really simple to follow, and it just seemed like that was going to make it more confusing. So I hope that this is clear enough to show you how I fold my poster zines. Okay. So we have got this folding in, and then this will fold like this, right? Now the reason is, this is how our poster is going to go together and fold properly. Now also, similar to that tiny zine I showed you, this one, this is folded the same way, but it doesn't have a poster on the back. So if making a zine and trying to figure out like how to, line up the pages seems just like a little too complicated, and if this is your first time, this way of folding is a great way to just make one piece of paper, not have to worry about, stapling or lining up pages. Just make the one, and you don't have to put a poster on the back. So I actually think this one might be glued so you never actually open it. So, same way, okay? I hope this is still a little bit clear. Now, the thing about poster zines is we have to cut this line in the middle. And this is a great time to use an X-Acto knife. I'm actually just going to use scissors because I don't have a cutting board here with me. So I'm going to cut from here to here. I'm just going to cut this center line right here. And I've creased it, so I actually have a guide. And when I'm actually folding my, many multiples of this, I will also fold everything first and then cut this out. And I'm cutting it pretty carefully so that it lays really properly. Okay. So this is what I have right now. Now, the reason that we folded one in and the other differently, I wish I had better terminology for that, is because now we go like that, right? So our zine can sit. And because of the way that we folded it, it will go in on itself very well and create our zine. Okay? Now, when I'm making my actual pieces, this is a great time to use your bone folder so that it lines up really well. Once I've kind of lined everything up, I am going to push this crease. And I'm just going to smush the whole thing a little bit because it makes it just lay really flat. I mean, look at that. That is like so smooth. So now you can see, got my 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then front and back cover. So let's say we've opened my quarantine zine and we're like looking at this back poster. To put them back together, set them down, and they kind of want to go back together the way they came. So now I have this master I have made to help me as a guide, and I can make all of the artworks. So maybe I want to make it not this size, but I want to make it bigger, which is fine. I could, scan it and print it smaller. If I'm just doing a fun illustration, so maybe I just make it right on here, because it just depends on how important it is to have like this larger original with you at the time. So I know that this is the ratio of my pages, and now I can have this as a guide. So I'm pretty much ready to make a zine. I know this was a little bit confusing showing you how to fold this. There are lots of other resources on the internet as well. I think it's sometimes helpful to watch someone do it. So hopefully watching me fold this helped you have some ideas about how to do it. Now, I'm actually working on a zine right now about violets. So the kind of different uses of wild violets. Because I'm spending a lot of time at home and thinking about, like, what can I do in the sunshine outside? Like, how can I do this? What can I make? Because I tend to be, like, pretty interested in the things around me and try to be really resourceful. So I'm making a zine about violets. And I think I'll probably just draw them right this size and make a poster of a violet illustration on the back. I was also going to show you another little mock-up I've made. This is for a zine I'm making about oranges. So I made a little mock-up, which it kind of helps me to visualize how I'll put it together. And this is going to be mostly photographs, and it won't be quite this size. It'll be a little bit bigger. It'll probably be this size. And it's going to be an accordion zine. And if you've ever done accordion books, you know, I'm folding forward, flipping, folding backward, flipping, and folding again, so that you know you end up with this shape. So it's going to be an accordion zine about oranges, and it's going to come out like this, but it both the beginning and the end are glued in. And then this cover, which when it closes, is going to be orange and textured like an orange. So it's kind of neat. It'll be this orange theme zine that looks like it has an orange as a cover. But I made this mock-up so I could kind of have a sense of, like, how many pages do I need? And just because I like to visualize it and think about it, and if I have a real sense of how it's made, I'm going to have a better picture of how to put it together. And I won't be surprised later. That's another reason, is like, if you test it, you know, I'm going to run into the problems now rather than later. So that is something I'm working on. Now, the last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to show you a little bit about my process of holding on to my zines and organizing and all the masters that I do. So because I've been making zines a long time, I have a couple of these. So this is like some zine masters. This is not my only one. And this one's pretty big. So I try to organize things by title, and I try to keep original drawings together. This is one about my friend Frankie's dreams, you know. I have the original text for that. So anything that I kind of put together in case I need to revisit it, I keep in here. And I try to do a good job of archiving, because I may not remember the notes. Something else I have in here, I notice I have some notes about what color everything is printed on if I need to reprint. Yeah, because I might forget exactly what color, you know, this zine gets printed on. So this is how I organize. Yeah, I just organize it sort of like this. I might have notes about how I'm making them. I might have other things. So I try to keep things pretty organized. I know it looks a little bulky, but I like to have it all together, because if in case I need to revisit this, it also feels well protected. So that is how I organize all of my zine masters, right? I know it's a little bit wild, but it's how I organize. So I hope that this has been helpful for you, thinking about how to make zines, you know, what zines are about, how to make a really simple one. Thank you for joining me. Again, my name is Krieger, and I'm a teaching artist with Louisville Visual Art. I hope that all of you are staying safe and sane. I can't wait for us to all be together to make zines and have Zine Fest. I know a lot of Zine Fests have been canceled this spring that I was planning on tabling at. So it's a good time to make a zine. I've actually sent a lot of these in the mail to my friends, which is a nice way to remind people that, like, you know, we've got this, and we're all in it together. So thank you for joining me, and I hope that you have a wonderful day and make lots of great stuff.